What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Established Run's NBA Injury Report Analysis Show. I'm Drew Dinkmeyer here with Mike Gallagher to walk you through today's 10-game slate, a little bit larger slate in the association. We'll try to keep it under an hour. We'll see if we're successful and able to do it today. With me to go through it, Mike Gallagher. Mike, how are you?
Pretty good, yeah, not too bad. There's not a lot of stuff on the slate injury-wise. We got some travel stuff to talk about. Certainly, we'll talk about some big injuries. We saw some really big rotation changes last night for some teams on back-to-backs with Cade Cunningham and Jakob Poeltl that we'll go through. But yeah, I think that the over/under line, under an hour, I would probably get plus money. I think we got it.
Nice, good to hear. Yeah, travel issues is where we'll start. We'll start with the Minnesota and Boston game. Minnesota was not able to fly out of Orlando due to East Coast weather last night. And this impacted my life as well, as my fiance was unable to travel back and got diverted to Baltimore. So I was up late trying to help her figure out ways to get home. Minnesota has ruled out Mike Conley for rest. Rudy Gobert is questionable with left hip soreness. And just in general, a team flying in and playing the same day is a very unusual situation. So they're flying in today. They'll get in, I believe the quotes from last night where they get in early afternoon and then play tonight. Very disruptive to an NBA player's calendar, body clock, and whatnot. So what are your expectations for Minnesota tonight?
Yeah, I should note that when this news came out, the spread was 6 for Boston, and I jumped on it. As you mentioned, we see this happen, and most of the time it's a disaster. It happened to OKC. They came out so flat, and they were able to kind of storm back against the Hawks. Generally, it goes pretty poorly because these players are so consistent with their prep and all that. So, yeah, not surprising that Mike Conley's missing his first game. Rudy Gobert, questionable tag. Certainly a good chance he misses, especially if he's, not 100% and doesn't have his proper prep. But he wouldn't have a shoot around anyways for a travel back-to-back. But, not getting your normal prep definitely makes him more likely to sit. With the Conley stuff. So there's really 3 candidates. I think 2 that are kind of strong candidates. Jordan McLaughlin and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I think given the matchup, if you take the matchup out of it, I think Jordan McLaughlin would be the favorite. They really like slow-mo kind of in the second unit to kind of like handle things. So I think Na and slow-mo would kind of fit better in the second unit. Of course, slow-mo could also start for Cat. I'm sorry, for next to Cat, I should say. So we've got a little bit of a hedge on Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Jordan McLaughlin. It could go kind of either way. We're kind of like debating that we think it's not just because the Celtics have so much length and so many ways to attack that I think adding more defense makes sense. Certainly Anthony Edwards handles a ton anyway. So we're leaning not to start there. Certainly either way, those guys would benefit minutes. We'll see if Shake Milton gets in, Troy Brown gets in to fill those minutes. Conley doesn't play that much. Then you got the Gobert stuff. Probably could assume that they're, again, it's a little bit of, you might just like start Na and slow-mo together, and bring him in that way if they don't have Gobert, because we know Cat's, kind of came up as a 5. So I think that's kind of where we're at. I think they kind of like Nas off the bench. So that would be my leans on the Gobert. Certainly Nas would play a hefty bit more. They did also, worth noting, they called up Leonard Miller and who's, I think Josh Minot, I think, was the other guy they called up. So, yeah, definitely odd for a team that was supposed to be in Vegas yesterday, or today, I should say. So, yeah, kind of leaning Gobert out, and then again, leaning Nickeil Alexander-Walker starting over Jordan McLaughlin, but don't feel strongly about it.
Yeah, would make a lot of sense to me that Kyle Anderson would start over Naz Reid in that instance, even though Naz Reid traditionally big, just the matchup as well. You're generally needing more kind of wing switchability, defense, and whatnot. So all of that drives for me. Let's move to Boston side of things, where their injury report is pretty full as well. So if you were betting on the news like Mike was, you do have closing line value now, but you got to sweat some questionable tags as well. So Drew Holiday questionable, right elbow sprain. Al Horford questionable, illness non-COVID, and Kristaps Porzingis questionable, right knee contusion. They've listed some of the G Leaguers out. JD Davison, who's been crushing in the G League. I know you're in tune with that. But what are your notes here on the questionable tags for the Celtics tonight?
Yeah, shout out Red Claws for sure. So they got to sit somebody here. They are on a back-to-back. Definitely thinking one of Horford or Kristaps sits. We saw Tatum get the injury management tag on an ankle injury that he hurt a couple games ago. So they're kind of in a spot where it looks like they're going to get some rest in there. As you mentioned, I took that -6 and I was like, okay, I'll just deal with it. And then I got plenty of value, and if I wanted to just cash it out, I can get a little bit of money.
Yeah.
I'm pretty quick with the 20 and after as well. So yeah, yeah, I don't really have too much to say. It seems like Drew could definitely sit again. He's been listed with this right elbow thing for a little bit, so it seems like just they kind of get him a game off before a pretty big game against the Bucks tomorrow. So yeah, I don't really have a great feel for who. Certainly, it seems like they may sit Drew today, Chris Stapps today. We saw Chris Stapps playing the last back to back. Yeah, I don't have a great feel for it. If Drew's out, then they're probably okay still. Considering the size, even if Gobert sits, I still think they might just start Horford, but Horford might sit. They might start one big. If kind of everyone's out, they may go to DeLon Banton and then win whatever big. If everyone's out, then Luke Cornett would probably get the start. We saw Cornett get a pretty hefty start. The last time they were really shorthanded as he kind of iced Mias Keita. So yeah, it's kind of unclear. It is the first game of the day. We should have this when you guys are talking on the DFS show. Sorry if that was kind of a place here.
No, I would just note that combination of Minnesota potentially being shorthanded, the matchup tomorrow with Milwaukee, which when you think through the matchup tomorrow with Milwaukee, you would think Drew would be interested in being a part of that game, a little bit more motivated to be a part of that game than this one. So if they're picking a spot, you would think Drew would potentially rest here. And then if you think about Milwaukee in terms of like what you want against Milwaukee, you kind of want both Horford and Porzingis. Horford's been their best option against Giannis for a long time, but you also kind of want that rim protection from Kristaps Porzingis, which is making me think there's a decent chance that actually, instead of seeing a situation which we've seen throughout the back-to-backs this year where it's Horford off for one, Porzingis off for another, that if we get Gobert out as well here, you might just see them both out and sort of let's take our shots tomorrow and focus on tomorrow and see if we can beat kind of a not rested Minnesota team that's shorthanded with, the two Jays and Derek White and kind of figuring out things from there. So I'm very, very alerted here to the potential that all three could sit, where usually I'm like, it's probably one of the two.
Yeah.
I think there's a little bit more because of the schedule to think that it could be both of them today.
For sure. They want to be ready for tomorrow, no doubt.
Sacramento and Charlotte on the Sacramento side. They're on the second night of a back-to-back here, but no significant injuries on the injury report, just without their G Leaguers. Any notes here on the Sacramento side of things?
Yeah, big changes to the rotation. Kevin Huerter, as we noted on the show, got the starter's jersey, and as everyone who knows who watched the show, starter's jerseys are undefeated. Huerter played, not that great, but had a pretty long leash, so that was a big change. And then the other big change was the tightened up backcourt. We saw Malik Monk kind of pull away as being he used to be really a straight 2, a little bit of 3, but he was more of a 1-2 as he ran with Fox a little bit more, as they kind of iced Keon Ellis and then Davion Mitchell as well, who wasn't in the rotation at all. So there's that. And then we saw this Kings team get in a big hole. They allowed 47 points in the first, and Mike Brown said after the game he was not planning to play Juan Toscano-Anderson, but given the way they didn't have energy, he thought that putting him in there, which you would think was at the expense of the guards. So does that stick? I don't know. We know Juan Toscano-Anderson and Mike Brown have a history from the Golden State Warriors days. So we have like Juan Toscano-Anderson like pretty much even with the Davions of the world, but it could go kind of either way. Against the Hornets team, it's also going to be pretty shorthanded. So this game's kind of interesting. I actually covered boy Terry Rozier, who we'll get to, but Juan Toscano-Anderson kind of cut into Harry B a little bit, and then Domantas Sabonis, man, just after a year and change after Jalen Duren said that Sabonis is easy to guard. He goes ham on him for a 37-point triple-double. I flag planted the wrong King. I flag planted Fox. Did hit an overforce, though. But, and Keegan, man, I saw chat talking about him. Just absolute flamethrowing. He got to 27 on 100 effective field goal percentage and then was a tick under 100 with just absolute chaos on the offensive end late, just leaking out all day. Got so many easy baskets, had some nice step-back threes. Just a monster game for Keegan Murray. And you could note, too, if they're going to tighten this rotation up a little bit, that's great for Keegan. They have no faith in Harrison Barnes anymore. So Keegan looks like he's in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, I thought some of the takeaways here for Sacramento were them tightening up, but also, as you alluded to, cutting down Mitchell and Keon, which I'm not sure if I noted on this show or on the DFS show, but I said the absence of Cade could knock those guys down a decent bit. The interesting thing to me there is that allowed them to have a longer leash with Huerter, even while still playing Monk a bit. So Huerter and Monk were not as tied together last night. I do not know if that is a long-term stable situation that you can count on, because last night I do not think that they had the same level of pressure to get a backcourt defender out there. So we'll see tonight. Again, Terry Rozier is a player that you want to give defensive attention to, but just the way the rotations line up, we're not talking about heavy minutes for the second unit guys unless somebody closed, like unless Davion or Keon closed over Monk, and that feels a little bit thin. So you might see it again tonight. The situations that I'd be more on alert for are when there's like multiple backcourt defensive threats that you really need to pay attention to. Last night there was like Jaden Ivey. Tonight it's Terry Rozier, and Rozier's been on one, so maybe it changes because he's been on such a tear. But generally, I'd be thinking that Herter and Monk's minutes are more tied together in games where there are two backcourt options that you have to give defensive attention to, because then it makes it more likely that you see one of, I think if it's just one guy, I think they feel like they can probably get by, but we'll see tonight on how things adjust there. But that was nice for Herter to get a longer leash. He didn't do anything with it. We'll see if that sticks. Okay. Charlotte side of things, they're without LaMelo Ball, without Gordon Hayward, without Mark Williams, PJ Washington listed doubtful, Cody Martin listed questionable here. What are your notes on the Hornets, who've been playing? They've been playing hard. They got a road win in Sacramento. They take Chicago to overtime at home here. They're just really short on talent right now. And also, I know Brandon Miller, who's not listed on the injury report. We've had issues with Charlotte's injury report. It was revealed that he's been battling an illness that's impacted his playing time. So what are your notes on the Hornets here?
Yeah, let's start with Miller. We were trying to figure out what's up with the light minutes a couple games ago, and we found out after the last game that he is, quote, really sick, and he is a, quote, team-oriented, or he wouldn't have played because he's dealing with the day-to-day thing. So not great. Not sure how Miller's minutes are going to fit. He's obviously not playing very well. So yeah, he could be better today. He could be worse today. I don't really know. But just know that Brandon Miller has a chance to crater, because it sounds like this thing is just kind of lingering with him. He had the same illness that Terry Rozier missed some time for. So keep an eye on that. Obviously, the Cody Martin thing, could be back. Don't really know. Getting listed with bilateral groin. That sounds terrible. So, and we know the Hornets have been a little shady at times with how they list players. PJ Washington getting the double doubtful tag for a foot strain. I think he could be missing multiple games. And so we have all that. So the other thing we saw that I know Klaff had benefited from, and we mentioned on the DFS show, was that Nick Smith and JT Thor could benefit. Steve Clifford basically says he's going to play him more, and they played Nick Smith a lot. One of their better he's a gunner, man. If they had to do an all gunner summer league team, he would have made he would have been like the captain. He likes to shoot it out there. So, which, shots equal volume. And upside, I should say. Shots definitely, anyways. So, keep an eye on him. Keep an eye on JT Thor. Obviously, I think Nick Smith wouldn't be in play as much if Cody Martin does play. So we have all that. Nick Richards played a ton. Again, there's no confidence in Mensah and all those guys. And then should Edmund Terry Rozier, the role is outrageous. Last 3 games, league high, almost 10 minutes of touch time. The pick and roll stuff's been insane. 20+ points off pick and roll in 3 of his last 4 games. They have really nothing else to go to. Miles Bridges playing 40 on the regular as well. So, kind of where we're at. So, bottom line here: Rozier, Miles, Nick Richards in really, really good spots. Who knows about Brandon Miller? Probably see some Nick Smith, maybe some JT Thor over Mensah, and then we'll see about Cody Martin.
All right, let's move to San Antonio and Detroit. On the San Antonio side, they have questionable tags for Dominic Barlow and Mamadi Diakite. They've had those for a while, seemingly. Zach Collins is still out. And of course, they're without Charles Bassey for the rest of the year. No injury notes for Victor Wembanyama or Keldon Johnson or Devin Vassell, who we've seen littered on the injury report kind of throughout the season. So that's good news, assuming we're still on the minutes limitations for Wembanyama. What other notes do you have on the Spurs?
Yeah, Wemby, last we heard, he hasn't got this big update to possibly give him more minutes. Seems like that's going to be a little bit. So, expecting Wemby to hang around this 24-ish minutes. They're always trying to buy him a minute here and there, so it's not like a hard 24, like, say, Chris Middleton earlier in the year. So, that's kind of where we're at. But the usage has been insane, man. He's been hanging mid-30s usage all the time. So, he could still kind of get there. matchup is freaking fantastic against Detroit's defense, who we'll get to in a second. So we've got that. And then Trey Jones, kind of locked and loaded. The touch time's been really, really strong. The shooting hasn't been big volume-wise. He's been shooting it very well, though. So he's kind of locked in. So we're going to get the starting lineup, I would say, quite confidently about – and I think Champagne's in there. So Trey Jones, Devin Vassell, Wemby, Sohan, and Julian Champagnie. Keldon Johnson off the bench, still chucking, still driving, still catching and shooting. The role's been great. He's been just dominating second half usage. And the minutes have held up. They've been in some pretty close games. So, Keldon's got one of the highest bench upsides considering the matchup, really on the slate today. We'll talk about Ben Mathurin in a second. But kind of the 6 core guys. Dom Barlow. I'll be on G League tracker here in a second, but I would imagine Barlow. This is pretty fake Q tag, so I think he'll be out there. I can't imagine he's anywhere else, so expect Barlow to be in there. So those are your 7: Malachi Branham, Jetty Osman, and then we'll see if Blake Wesley kind of gets pushed aside. I definitely think he could, though.
Yeah, it's really something, the lines that Wembanyama is putting up in these like 24, 25 minutes, and it's hard to envision what kind of statistical performances we're going to see 3 or 4 years from now when he's put on NBA weight training and his body has continued to mature and he's playing full minutes. There are going to be numbers that I don't think we have seen in my lifetime. Like I think we're going to see something outrageous, like a player averaging upper 30s points and upper teens rebounds and 4 blocks a game and stuff. Like it's going to be really, really outrageous with what he's able to do right now.
Chris Lafikas asked me if I'll just really quick. Chris Lafikas asked me if he's going to be more of a bruiser, more of a Dirk type. I said yes. He's going to just do everything.
Yeah, it's crazy. Detroit side of things, Cade Cunningham still out, Isaiah Stewart doubtful. What other notes do you have on the Pistons?
So we saw them play last night and went mostly as expected. I'm not going to screw this up today. Bojan hit a lot of shots early, looked great as expected. Minutes are pretty strong. There was commentary from Monty a couple games ago saying you play him too much. Pretty much threw that out the window. And the Jaden Ivey, pretty aggressive, pretty strong shooting. Great matchup here. One of the worst transition defenses in the NBA again. So I think Jaden Ivey's in a pretty good spot. Killian Hayes minutes kind of got there, but was not shooting much. Was very much playing kind of connector-ish kind of role. And then Jalen Duren, as I mentioned, the touches were there. We talked a lot about this yesterday. That Monty Williams says they want to run more stuff through him, try to get him to the line more. That didn't happen yesterday. So those 3 guys, Ivey, Duren, and Bojan are going to be in a pretty good spot. Worth noting that Alec Burks didn't get listed today. We saw him have that hamstring listing, which I was keeping an eye out for after the big Utah game when he hit the buzzer beater. We did get an Isaiah Stewart upgrade to doubtful, so it seems like he's going to be maybe next game there. That'll be affecting the rotation. They won't have Cade, but you would assume Livers is probably going bye-bye there. Ausar Thompson picked up 3 really, really quick fouls. He's kind of in really big trouble. And then they brought Joe Harris out after they had this big lead. They blew it, and they went to Joe Harris again to kind of get him back. Weissman looks to be ahead of Marvin Bagley. And then, the Sasser-Burke stuff seems like it's not too sticky. Burke certainly is, but Sasser's minutes are a little shaky. A little benefit from Ausar kind of getting in foul trouble.
Yeah, on the Detroit side of things, the note of connector for Killian Hayes is definitely what I noticed watching the games. One of the challenges that they have offensively is if they're going to play him a lot, he's not really a spot-up shooter, so it's kind of hard to just have him kind of standing in the corner and have the defenses respect it at all. So what they're doing is they're using him to kind of like bring up the ball, but then get to either one of Ivy or Bogdanovich, get the ball into those guys' hands, and then they can kind of run pick and roll off of a dribble handoff or something like that. And it's clunky. It's all like it forces them deeper into the shot clock. So the Killian Hayes stuff, if he's not going to be able to be an on-ball creator, the minutes are vulnerable is kind of the way that I'd put this. The offense that they're running right now, it worked really well in the first quarter, largely because they just made a bunch of shots. Basically, Bojan just couldn't miss in the first half or in the first quarter. But I think they're getting into stuff too late, just generally with Killian kind of at the helm. I don't think they trust Jaden Ivey's decision-making as much. So I think that's why they're doing it this way. but it's something that's going to need some fleshing out, because the way that they're doing stuff right now is basically they're starting possessions at the 16 or 14-second mark when everyone else is starting them at the 20-second mark. And that's just a tough way to score offensively. Okay, let's move to Washington and Indiana. On the Washington side of things, their injury report largely clean. Landry Shamet is out for personal reasons. What are your notes on the Wizards tonight?
Yeah, so that's not a huge deal. They've got enough depth now. They'll have the second unit with Bilal Coulibaly, who guarded SGA. Like, okay, he didn't get like roasted, which is step in the right direction for a rookie. And then DeLon Wright. They keep playing Muscala and then Corey Kispert. That'll kind of be their core guys. We'll see if they bring anybody in. It wouldn't matter. The headline here for me was Jordan Poole, and he was playing great. He had a 15-point third quarter, and Wes Unseld didn't bring him in until late in the game. He liked the second unit, mentioned Coulibaly and all that. So, man, it just Poole he had it going. This is his chance to rebound from a really cold spell, and he was on his way. One of his best quarters in weeks, honestly. And he couldn't get out there for the bulk of the fourth quarter minutes. So that was pretty tough to see. Tyus Jones, really wide range of outcomes. The spread could be, tight. We've seen them kind of hang around sometimes. They've been playing a little bit better lately. Kyle Kuzma has a huge ceiling when they hang in close games. We talked about this for so long. Really good matchup for Daniel Gafford. We know we like to play centers against the Pacers. Although their rim defense has been considerably better. They're like they're like the last 5-6 games. They're like, bottom 10 compared to bottom 1. So I think those guys could also kind of benefit. But pretty much kind of know where we're at. Just a massive amount of volatility in Jordan Poole's minutes here. And a great matchup, though.
Yep. And while you were talking there, the 28 after crowd was burned by the 21 after notes as the Celtics announced that Kristaps Porzingis will sit tonight, but Drew Holiday and Al Horford are in. So nice to get that news early. I'm going to, since I won't be on the injury show tomorrow because Gary handles that on Thursdays, I'll let you know right off the bat that I'm going to call my shot that tomorrow night, starting for the Boston Celtics, O'Shea Brissett. That's
okay.
going to be
Giannis duty.
Yeah, he gets the Giannis duty. I don't think they're going to have KP have the Giannis duty. I don't think they're going to have Tatum have the Giannis duty. So I think O'Shea Brissett will be the starter tomorrow. But that's literally for another day. Any other notes now that we know who's in and who's out for Boston?
No, it's pretty straightforward. I think we're going to see the one big lineup, and that's it. So this is kind of the easy way out. We just got so I think it's pretty straightforward. I don't know if a little bit more. Horford starting, a little bit more. Luke Cornett, of course, a little bit O'Shea here and there, but having their backcourt intact is good, and I feel pretty good about my -6 now.
Yeah. All right. Indiana side of things, no Tyrese Haliburton tonight. So what is life without Tyrese Haliburton look for Indiana in a great matchup against Washington tonight?
Yeah, obviously huge matchup here for this team that's missing their best player. Should note that their offensive split is massive. You're talking about like 10 points per 100 with Hallie on and off. Defense has been about the same. So who starts? Pretty easy answer, I would say. We saw in the second half it was Andrew Nembhard getting the start in his place, and Bruce Brown kind of holding steady. Nesmith, Jalen Smith, and Miles Turner. And then, of course, you had a lot of TJ McConnell, who was awesome. Limited minutes. He still got to like 5.5 minutes of touch time. Really was the engine of the offense late in this game to pull off a really, really beautiful comeback with a strong third quarter from the Pacers. So as much as McConnell may not start, he's the guy. He just carries the second unit. They've run some overlap with him. We have like 1 minute of overlap. Because they've run at the second unit. They have, I think, like almost 40 minutes of overlap between the two of them. And against the Wizards, they can get away with it against that bad second unit. So we got 1 minute. Could be more. So I think McConnell could have a real chance to come off the bench and close and maybe hit, 30 minutes or something if he's running hot. So, not great. In those two games, we talk about these two games last year when the Pacers were without Haliburton and McConnell, and we saw Nembhard moon against Damian Lillard and Steph, but McConnell didn't play in those games. So, I think McConnell's the guy that carries things here. And I want to talk about Benedict Mathurin. He's playing awesome, man. And I'm in the streets. I've got some 25-1 tickets for 6th man of the year on Ben Mathurin. Comments from Rick Carlisle saying he's really the only guy right now who can kind of get difficult game-winning kind of shots from one-on-one. Minutes have been really strong. Usage is way up. He's shooting the lights out right now. He's over 70 true shooting in his last 6-7 games. He's been great. So that's kind of where we're at. So again, the key beneficiaries, I would say McConnell number 1 with a bullet, Nembhard, Mathurin. Well, I don't really think Buddy Hield, he benefits a little bit because he's not competing as much with these other guards there, but not a clear beneficiary. And then I don't think Bruce Brown really benefits. Those 3 guys I mentioned are kind of guys who benefit the most.
Yeah, a bunch of notes there that I think are really important to go over. The Indy point guard situation, I think, is going to be one that most people are going to feel super confident on TJ McConnell because he's been kind of the more consistent producer of the two. And I think his role is more stable. I do think Nembhard has a wider range of outcomes on the role, which means also a wider range to the high end in terms of the minutes, because I do think that if Nembhard is like, he's going to go out there in the starters lineup in an offense that the entire offense is built around the point guard having control of everything. And if he goes out there and he's playing really well, I think he could play a ton. But if he goes out there and he's not the slightest misstep in terms of him not playing well, McConnell can take that and run with it, and Nembhard could get pushed to the bench. So I think the minutes range on Nembhard is really wide. I think the minutes range on McConnell is a little bit tighter. I think McConnell is also a little bit more of a known quantity in terms of what you're getting. So I think you kind of know what you're getting with McConnell. Nembhard's a little bit more of a wild card. I'd also note that the absence of Tyrese Haliburton, what does that mean for Indiana offensively? They need to replace shot creation in a big way. And who's the most adept player shot creation-wise on their team? It's Benedict Mathurin. And so now you're getting into a situation where McConnell, Nembhard, Mathurin, that's 3 guard-ish players for 2 to 3 spots. You could maybe play at 3 spots in this matchup against Washington, especially if you wanted Nembhard's defense on Jordan Poole. If like Poole was cooking, this is another like Poole's a pretty volatile situation. So depending on him, you might want Nembhard out there as your best defender as well. I think the guys who are going to be potentially vulnerable here that could get cut down a little bit as Indiana is forced to maybe play smaller to create more offense because they have guys at the smaller positions that can create offense, is the bigs, the Jalen Smith, the Obi Toppin. I think those guys who, look, I was on quite a bit last game, Jalen Smith and Obi Toppin, because I thought it was a much better matchup for them. But without Tyrese Haliburton, who creates a lot of their offense for them, there could be lineup decisions that are made to try to fill in that offensive void by elevating Mathurin and maybe even Hield and playing more wings as opposed to the 4s. So I think, especially in this matchup with Washington, team that doesn't have a ton of size, I think those guys are a little bit more vulnerable tonight.
I'll add really quick with the Obi Toppin thing.
It looks like
I was just gonna say with Obi Toppin really fast. He's been pretty, thing's gonna pop back in. He was kind of lagging there. He's been able to create his own shot. We saw this a lot late season where Obi Toppin was able to kind of create his own shot when the Knicks were kind of just sitting guys down and Randall was resting. So I think I was just talking about how Obi has some shot creation when we saw about that Knicks tanking. So I'm with you. I think that the Isaiah Jacksons of the world, the Jalen Smiths of the world could be kind of cut short just to add at least a little bit of some sort of creation, because Jalen Smith and Isaiah Jackson, unless they're getting a rebound, are not very good shot creators.
Yeah, Jalen has a little bit more to him because he has a post-up game to him. I would say he's somewhat similar to Obi, but it's challenging. Like Haliburton really creates a lot of the offense for those guys. So I think they're vulnerable, and I'd be careful out there. OKC and Miami on the Oklahoma City side, Ousmane Dieng and Olivier Sarr listed out along with Keontae Johnson and Davis Bertans. Any notes on the Thunder, who've been exceptionally healthy this season? Fingers crossed.
Yeah, they are cruising. Not much. The only note I have is Aaron Wiggins. Really good game from him, and Mark Dagnall talked him up like crazy. So we were trying to figure out who's going to be the solidified players in. I think we know 8 now for sure. Isaiah Joe, Aaron Wiggins, and Cason Wallace kind of have the 9 locked down with the starters. With 8, locked down with the starters. I think Kenrich Williams is mostly in. So we're seeing after years, we may have a look at what a consistent OKC rotation might be right now. And should mention J-Dub, man. Just unbelievable play. His touch time's up. His front court touches are up. pick and roll handling stuff's up. Mark Daigneault basically said he's separated from the rest of the roster as a secondary handler, which is not great for Josh Giddey, who performed okay stat wise, but yeah, J-Dub just on the rise in a big way as a disciplined, well-rounded offensive weapon, not just a scorer anymore.
Yeah, the other thing I'll note about that 9th spot in the rotation is going to be pretty matchup dependent when you need Jalen Williams. They against Washington, you don't need him, right? But against Denver, you might need him. Against Philadelphia, you might need him. So like, I think that spot is going to be a little bit fluid based on matchup, but they like playing small. So Jalen Williams is only kind of used against the very big matchups would be my guess. Miami side of things, Jimmy Butler out, Kyle Lowry doubtful, Caleb Martin doubtful, Josh Richardson probable. What are your notes on the Heat here?
Yeah, not great. Let's start with the Jimmy spoke to the media since we last talked. Just want to hit that. He's running pain-free. That's not good if that's like the headline. So he's still multiple games away. I don't know how much longer. I mean, I think it's honestly closer to like next month than in this month. So it'll be maybe around your birthday or later. But yeah, Bam's role has been really good. Let's talk about Nikola Jovic really fast. So Spoelstra really talked him up. He says that if they got to play him. They don't want to bring him in Miami. They're either going to play him here or send him to Sioux Falls. Yeah. So he's played pretty well. This matchup is really bad for him. I think he could be exposed, but I would lean him starting. And then of course we don't have Kyle Lowry, so that should get Josh Richardson in the starting lineup. I wouldn't be totally surprised if they just start RJ Hampton for the grand opening, grand closing. But we are going to lean Josh Richardson starting. Certainly Tyler Hero. Tyler Hero got his roll back. That was great. We talked a lot about how Tyler Hero, since Jimmy went down, the touch time was buried, wasn't driving, wasn't doing anything that Tyler Hero does when he cooks. And that happened partly because of no Kyle Lowry. So could be a really, really nice spot for Tyler Hero in a matchup that's pretty bad. Like he's going to see Lou Dort, really good on-ball defense there. So, yeah, expecting a starting lineup of Josh Richardson. Not sure about that. Tyler Hero, Nikola Jovic, Jaime Jaquez, and Bam Adebayo. The bench, Kevin Love was really good. He had a really strong performance against the Rockets. Expect him to get a pretty good bit. Duncan Robinson, the beneficiary of this defense, right? OKC, number 2 in catch and shoot points allowed. So it's a little thin to play him, but yeah, that Bam Duncan pick and roll. His dribble handoff game was really, really strong. I think he had 7 dimes, Duncan. I think like 4 or 5 of them were to Bam. Just a huge part of the offense. Haywood Highsmith held around. Wouldn't be surprised if Haywood Highsmith cuts into Jovic here more because of the matchup. But yeah, we kind of know the 8. Maybe they bring Jamal Cain in. We've seen Spoelstra be pretty comfortable running 8 though, kind of frequently. So I think they're going to have 8. Maybe we see Jamal Cain. Who knows though?
Yeah, your note on Jovic in the matchup, I understand from like Haywood Highsmith, Kane, athleticism, wing guard ability kind of makes sense. But I would also say that if they're really intent on playing him, they could cut down Kevin Love and play Jovic over Kevin Love a little bit more. Now, Kevin Love's played really well and been a pretty consistent producer that they've been able to rely upon in the second unit. The second unit for OKC isn't going to threaten you quite as much defensively. Jovic's athleticism is good. He just, he made a couple nice plays in transition defense last game. It's just young players can struggle on knowing exactly where to be at all times. But that's a second note there. Highsmith and Kane are definitely more trusted, reliable kind of wing defenders than Jovic when put out on an island for sure. One
thing to add that I was a little bit surprised with, they ran 0 zone. The Synergy had them at no zone defense. They kind of loaded up against Şengün. So my Fred VanVleet takes were right for the wrong reasons. So we'll take that. And it still clips okay. But teams hate playing zone against the Thunder. Thunder at like almost 1.2 points per possession against zone this year. And teams run it and just like abandon ship. It's just not working.
Interesting.
So I'm curious to see how that works today.
Sort of surprising because you'd think zone would be a good way to play them just in terms of, making them shoot from deeper and from the outside as opposed to a team that can get to the rim and get to the mid-range so effectively. But Chet's probably been a big problem there. Let's move to Philadelphia and Atlanta. On the Philadelphia side, Joel Embiid remains out. If you are, kind of counting along at home for MVP odds and whatnot, I think this will be his 9th missed game, something like that. And you can miss up to 17 before you are removed from the awards conversation. So If you are seeing timelines at all that extend, that suggest Embiid can miss more games and whatnot, the MVP market probably is not adjusting quite quickly enough just yet.
It has actually.
Okay. Is there a new favorite in the MVP parts?
Yeah, Gary's guy, Nikola Jokic. He's up to plus 180. Embiid's buried, man. His odds got doubled. He's plus 450 now on FanDuel. I was kind of waiting for this to happen because this is a knee thing and he's not practicing.
Yep.
It's coin flippy, right? That he hits the 65. So the market has clearly adjusted, at least on FanDuel. I could check some other books.
No, that makes sense. De'Anthony Melton questionable here. Robert Covington out are the other notes from an injury perspective on Philadelphia. So what are you expecting to see tonight in a great matchup against the Hawks?
Yeah, Melton went through practice. Certainly going to be on Trae Young. We'll see how he is handled, managed. We've seen the bottom drop out sometimes, but they need the on-ball defense in a significant way here to slow down Trae Young. We've seen their pick-and-roll handling defense really fall off a little bit lately, namely to this team on the screen. Other matchups, guards have got them. Their pick-and-roll stats have been dropping as Melton's been down as I checked the synergy stuff. So, yeah, expecting him to start pretty confidently. Then the next question is who starts next to him. Obviously, Tobias is starting. He practiced, good to go. So the question is it Kelly Oubre Jr. or is it Nicholas Batum? Now, Batum, for about 2 months now, except for the game he had minutes limit, has started. They love Batum, and they love Batum for on-ball defense. He actually guards three-quarter court against ball handlers all the time. They love this dude. So I'm leaning Batum starts. It could be Oubre, maybe to take some pressure off Melton, but that's kind of my feel. Oubre should still get pretty good minutes. Jaden Springer probably going away. And then, Paul Reed, great matchup. Vulnerable, though. He could look really bad in this spot, but, the Hawks have terrible rim defense. Rebounding's been an issue. So those guys should benefit. Certainly, we may not see Mo Bamba. We'll see if they go small. I think that's on the table. Just to kind of space things out. Could look pretty bad against the way this team attacks. So, again, leaning Paul Reed. I wouldn't be totally shocked if they really flip things around. We saw Marcus Morris start earlier in the year. So, yeah, should expect Paul Reed, but I wouldn't expect something, I wouldn't be shocked if we see something crazy now that they do have some wing depth to maybe use Marcus Morris as more of a 5. But again, I'm expecting Paul Reed. Do think they could play small a little bit here, though.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think if Bamba was to go away, it would be by changing the starting lineup. So I think if Paul Reed is starting, you can expect Bamba to be playing, but in the second unit, there's not a lot to be gained by spacing out Okongwu because he's mobile enough to get out to the 3-point line. There's more to be gained by spacing out Capella. And so if you're going to do that tactic, you'd want to kind of do it in the first unit as opposed to in the second unit is my instincts on how you'd want to attack things. But I think it's a really good spot for Paul Reed. Kind of athleticism, up and down game environment, generate steals and blocks. That's Paul Reed's music. So hopefully we get a good performance from him tonight. Atlanta side of things, Clint Capella is questionable. So that should factor into some of the things we're talking about here. So is DeJounte Murray questionable with right hamstring tightness and trade rumors. Trae Young probable. Wesley Matthews questionable here. Kobe Buffkin also questionable on a G League assignment. So what are your notes on the Hawks and what are your expectations here tonight?
Yeah, kind of what I was getting at with Capella. Should note, so he had about a year and a half ago, I want to say, he had an Achilles thing that cost him some time. It's the other Achilles injury. So actually, this was a couple times. So this is the first time he's been listed with right Achilles in years. So just wanted to note that. Sit him. I mean, Achilles things are never really great to play through. So I think he's got a good chance to sit. As you mentioned, DeJounte Murray added with hamstring soreness. Somewhat shockingly, this is the first time he's popped up on the injury report with a hamstring. So, yeah, don't have a great read on this situation. Sure, you can play devil's advocate with the trade stuff, but he's been playing a ton. Certainly warranted to pop up in the injury report, and his scoring's been great. He's been scoring a lot. They've changed their offense a little bit, where he's been playing really second side and attacking on a reactionary defense as Trae kind of breaks it down. So, but again, if he's out, that's a pretty tricky question. So I think they start Trent Forrest. They're going to need somebody to guard Tyrese Maxey. We've seen them call on Trent Forrest to guard SGA. Someone else I'm forgetting. I think it was Tyrese Haliburton was the other guy. So, I think they would start Trent Forrest and bring Bogdan, 2 for 2 on my Bogdanoviches, Um, off the bench, certainly we would see, maybe we see Lundy, maybe we see more Matthews. Matthews questionable as well. Minute ceiling could be strong. Should also note that they ran overlap hardcore with Kun Capella and Okongwu, but that was more of a product of not having really bodies to play in this game. So I think that the double big overlap goes away. Easy part of Capella, I didn't even say it, but if he's out, they're obviously starting Okongwu, and he would be one of the best players on the slate. I don't know what the chalk would look like, but we saw in the last game they for the Sixers, John Collins pick and rolled Paul Reed to death. Okongwu, not your classic pick and roll big man, but I could see him kind of getting busy in this spot. So yeah, if Capella's out, we could see huge upside out of Onyeka Okongwu.
All right, let's move to Houston and Chicago. On the Houston side of things, Tari Eason and Dylan Brooks remain out. No other new injuries added on the injury report. What are your expectations for the Rockets tonight?
I don't really have much to say. Minutes have been mostly stabilized. Jayshawn Tate getting a pretty good ceiling without Tari Eason out there. The Amen Thompson thing's just not working anymore. We talked about a week ago that Ami Udoka wanted to find minutes for him. He found them, and he's ready to return it back to the store now with the receipt. So not looking great for him. Aaron Holiday probably has to play a little bit here for Zach LaVine and maybe even Kobe White. So I think Amen Thompson's minutes are not safe. Jabari Smith, great matchup, right? Team's leader in catch and shoot possessions. We love catch and shoot guys against the Bulls. So I think Jabari Smith, if he can avoid foul trouble against DeMar, or he could even guard LaVine, in a really big upside. Alfred Şengün, really good game despite getting really aggressively covered by the Heat. So yeah, just completely cruising. Mentioned the Fed Van Vliet note earlier, could play a ton. And then, Jalen Green, fully on box of chocolates. Just never know what you're going to get with that guy. But the minutes have been good.
Yep. On the Chicago side of things, Zach LaVine probable, Patrick Williams listed available, Alex Caruso listed available here tonight. I assume we're going to eventually see some lineup changes with Vucevic and LaVine. What are your expectations on when that happens?
Yeah, I'd be pretty shocked if they don't change it today. Billy Donovan was quite forward saying that he was, let me get the exact quote. I didn't use the quotation marks on this note, but I wrote he thinks he's going to go back to Vooch and LaVine for the next game. So he said that there's no need to bring them off the bench anymore. That's kind of all you need. The minutes limit was off. They went into overtime, and they just still played him in overtime. We saw that quote pregame that they were going to up his minutes, even though they were off the bench. So this was the classic, hey, I want to shorten the game a little bit. I think Doc Rivers has talked about this a little bit. Steve Kerr's talked about this a little bit, where they just bring guys off the bench just because that takes away the playing them too much card. So I think that was kind of the plan here. So I expect them pretty full. We got 33 on LaVine, 30 on Vooch. So we're 90%, maybe an 85% of the way of a full minutes. So yeah, expecting that to start. That would bump Alex Caruso to the bench, and obviously Andre Drummond would go to the bench. So Kobe White, Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Patrick Williams, Vooch in the starting lineup. Certainly going to have a little bit of Caruso. Minutes should come down a little bit. Dalen Terry sneaking in there, I would assume, is certainly in there. I think Javon Carter just bye-bye.
Yeah, and I would note that I think there's a chance that with Andre Drummond's play that Vucevic's ceiling is just not what it was early in the season. Because Drummond, 21 and 15 last game in 23 minutes, plus 16 in those minutes, super effective and impactful. He's been really good in this stretch. I know a lot of Bulls fans were really frustrated with the team's lack of rebounding when Vucevic has been on the floor, and really liked that from Drummond. So I could see something where we're settling in more like a 28 Vooch, 20 Drummond type situation, instead of earlier in the season, it was like 32 Vooch, 33 Vooch, and like 15 Drummond. And I'm talking about the extreme ends of the situations here. I think 28-20 would be like the best case scenario for Drummond, but I think we could get closer to that than the 32-33 and the 15 we saw from Drummond kind of earlier in the season, just because of how well he's played. Okay. Pelicans and Golden State. On the Pelicans side, Zion Williamson questionable right quad contusion, Jose Alvarado questionable non-COVID illness, and Cody Zeller available with face. What are your notes on the Pelicans tonight?
Facial McClure. So leg contusion, usually something where people return. This is Zion Williamson we're talking about here, so don't have a great read. The injury didn't look like terrible, but it's Zion. They will not put him on the court if they have any doubt that he is healthy. So we were blessed with a Trey Murphy book line over the weekend that I guess they missed the news that Trey Murphy's on a 20 to 25 minutes limit, returning from this knee injury that kept him out for 12 plus weeks since he suffered it. So yeah, he'll probably start again if he's out. Minutes limit should be on him. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at with the Zion thing. Don't have a great read on Alvarado if he's out. That would certainly help out Dyson Daniels a little bit. Yeah, so that's mostly that. And then the next question is Herb Jones. Certainly going to get Steph here. The minute ceiling could be really strong. Should note Steph kind of got the best of him and Dyson Daniels the last time they played. It was out Brandon Ingram, so Dyson and Herb kind of split it. It would not be that case. It would be Herb on Steph like the whole time here. If they have Zion in, they might even shuffle things around. So like low key, Dyson Daniels could like benefit a little bit more if Zion's out and they play a little bit smaller. Certainly, you don't have a lot of size on the wings, despite how, Jonathan Kuminga doesn't really like demand a, hey, we got to play bigger kind of a thing. So yeah, it's kind of weird that, if Zion's out, the Trey Murphy cap and the matchup could like push the rotation a little bit smaller. And that would obviously be huge for Herb if Zion's out. So yeah, I think that mostly covers it. And then how much does Valanciunas play? We've seen Larry Nance cut into him a little bit. We know teams don't like to play bigs against the Warriors to put him with some pick and roll stuff that they get caught up in. So yeah, kind of a whole lot going on here that I hope I laid it out. If you have anything to add, go for it.
No, I think you nailed it. Definitely a better spot for Larry Nance, I would think, than Jonas Valanciunas. Obviously, there's a little bit more ceiling to Joe Val when Zion is unable to go. But even if he was unable to go, this matchup makes it a little bit more difficult to fulfill that ceiling. The good news for Joe Val is the per-minute production would be likely quite good because he'd have a pretty big size advantage on most of the guys that he'd be facing there. Warrior side of things, Chris Paul, Gary Payton out, Draymond Green listed out, return to competition reconditioning. This allows me the seamless opportunity to promote our most recent podcast episode where we looked at a podcast about a podcast where we talked about the Draymond Green podcast. Really proud of that episode. So check it out on iTunes or Spotify, wherever you get your podcast established. Run NBA podcast episode 337, where we talked about the Draymond Green podcast. But he will not be available tonight as he is still working on his conditioning to get back into things. His commentary on it in his press conference yesterday was basically that's a coaches and training staff decision. I'm just going to keep working, and which all just sounds different from Draymond, which I like. I'm loving the different ways that I'm hearing him talk about things in terms of what I think it means about change for him, which we talked about on the podcast. But what are your expectations for the Warriors rotation tonight?
Yeah, that was a great pod, and love your thoughts on there. So if you haven't checked it out, go for it. But yeah, let's talk about what happened in this game. Certainly the massive change at halftime. They were getting completely wrecked. They could not stop the Raptors, who scored 76 points in the first half. They pulled out Jonathan Kuminga, Andrew Wiggins, and Trace Jackson Davis, and inserted Kevon Looney, Dario Saric, and Brandon Podziemski. After the game, Kerr said that the Wiggins-Kuminga lineup, quote, that lineup didn't click, and he said he did not want to go back to that starting lineup and want something different. I want to set the over-under at 5.5 press conferences of Steve Kerr saying he does not like to play Kuminga with Wiggins. I feel quite confident that's out the window. So I feel pretty good. And I always thought Paz was going to start. So I feel pretty good that 4 of the 5 starters are going to be Steph, Clay, I think Kuminga. It could be Wiggins. They could pull Kuminga out, maybe want to run him in the second unit, whatever. But I think it's Kuminga. Wiggins has been trash. He'll be better. We talked about that in the podcast. I hope we can turn it around. So yeah, those guys. And then I think Looney could be Trace Jackson Davis. I don't know. It's fool's errand to try to figure out what Kerr is going to do here. The bottom line is, Looney could still drop out. Do they pull him? Do they pull both out? I don't think they're going to pull Kuminga out. I could see them starting Moses Moody. That would be another candidate instead of Pod. So it could be Steph, Clay, Moody, Kuminga, and then probably Looney or Trace Jackson Davis. I don't know. It's like we've been talking about this for months now, that Steve Curtis has no grasp on his rotation. He doesn't want to play Kuminga big minutes. He just has to do it at this point. He's a really, really tough. This is a really tough projection to do. So yeah, I think Moody's got to play. He's been playing pretty well, so I feel pretty good about his minutes. But yeah, really a lot of volatility in the minutes from Kuminga, Wiggins, Looney, Trace Jackson Davis to a lesser degree, especially if Zion plays. Because if Moody has to earn minutes, it has to be off those guys.
Yeah, we talked about this on the podcast on the back end when we did talk some ball about where the Warriors go from here. And the challenge with getting Moses Moody playing time is it really has to come at the expense of Andrew Wiggins or Klay Thompson. And those are uncomfortable conversations and uncomfortable situations to take playing time from them at this point, because Pajemski's earned playing time. And then you get into the Kuminga minutes, which have been obviously vulnerable, but yeah, it's tricky to project Golden State going forward. I think this is one of these situations where when we are making minutes projections on a roster and a rotation, we are trying to guess what the coach is thinking and what the team is thinking about how they're going to play players on a given night. I think this is a situation that I'm not even sure that the Warriors have a very set idea of what they're trying to get out there each and every night. I think they're just trying to play with combinations and find things. So we're like guessing at what they're guessing at this point now. And that's when things get even more fragile. So outside of Steph, I think everybody has a wider range. I think Klay's probably a little bit of a tighter range. He's next tightest. And after that, I think everybody's range is just really, really wide, with lows on the teens side and highs into the upper 20s and low 30s for like everybody else on the roster here, which is just uncomfortable.
Two things to add. Klay's been this is probably the most stable Klay's minutes have been. Certainly the blowout cut him, but his minutes have been pretty secure. And then, they are just trying to get to Draymond. They're just like, do what we can, get Draymond back, and then we're good. Or what we think we're good.
All right, let's move to Denver and Utah at the Battle of Altitude. On the Denver side of things, no significant injuries. Julian Strother is out, but he's been kind of floating in and out of the rotation during the course of the year. I think this sort of stabilizes the bench rotation. But what are your thoughts here for the Nuggets?
Yeah, it's Jamal Murray in the second unit show. Commentary that he's going to be the man from Michael Malone. So that's kind of where they're at. So, Reggie Jackson will be kind of in the second unit a little bit, but he's going to be staggered away from Murray. Anyways, a little bit of overlap last game too. That's it. I don't have too much to add. Michael Porter Jr. is playing pretty well, but just not getting a lot of shot volume. Aaron Gordon mostly been unaffected from returning from the dog stuff. Should also note that DeAndre Jordan cut into Zeke Naji last game. That was because of Detroit having kind of more true centers for the whole game against Utah, who has some size, who they are one of the better rebounding teams in the NBA. I wouldn't be surprised to see if it's DeAndre Jordan ahead of Zeke Naji in the spot.
Utah side of things, their G Leaguers are out here. The rotation seems to have stabilized a bit. They're playing really good basketball, the best basketball they've played all year over the last few weeks. So what are your notes on the Jazz?
Yeah, I think we got we were going through the minutes and like, hey, this is easy today to do their minutes. Let's start with the defensive side. The last month, I think they're fourth in half-court defense. I noted it in matchups today. Yeah, last month they're fourth in half-court defense. When we were attacking them relentlessly for being a bad half-court defense, they're still getting killed by ball handlers, so it could still be a pretty good Jamal Murray spot. But yeah, this rotation is pretty stable. I cannot believe Simone Fontecchio. We have Simone Fontecchio and Lauri Markkanen like 2 or 3 minutes apart, which is madness to me. But that's what the numbers say. Jordan Clarkson, one of the best roles off the bench in the NBA. I mentioned he have a pretty good matchup here against the Bucks, and he did. So yeah, the starting lineup should be consistent. Walker Kessler, we'll see if he could maybe get out there. Maybe John Collins has a short leash. Certainly a matchup you don't want to play small against with Jokic, but they might put like Lauri on him or something like that. And it's certainly an uncomfortable thing. But yeah, I feel like maybe we get a, hey, new second half lineup kind of situation.
Yeah. The defense is Chris Dunn and Fontecchio. They've played really well defensively, and this is a win for Jazz Twitter. Jazz Twitter has been wanting more Chris Dunn in their lives all season long, and they've gotten more Chris Dunn in their lives, and they've played well and played effective. And I will just continue to note that whoever has that like lead point guard role on this team, we consistently see this. Whoever is starting in that role, whether it was Talen Horton-Tucker, whether it was Keontae George, whether it was Colin Sexton, now it's been Chris Dunn, the assist opportunities spike like crazy. And it gives at times our projection system a little bit of fits because it's not about the player, it's about the role. And So I'm constantly having to like adjust baselines and stuff on news and lineups, but it's something that I caught on to when Talen Horton-Tucker and Keontae George, and it took, I shouldn't say we're slow to catch it, but like the market taught us basically over time because we were betting unders on Keontae George assists when he got promoted to the starting lineup. It's this role, it's not the player, and it's because they run so much offense through like catch and shoot stuff with Lauri Markkanen and then dive stuff with John Collins. There's just a bastion of assist opportunities for these guys when they're in that role. It's really a challenge. One of my most challenging projection situations to deal with this season. Okay. Toronto and the Clippers. Victory laps for me on the Thaddeus Young call yesterday for Toronto. He played way more than I thought he would have played, but he played effectively. Shout out to Thad. I don't know how that body's going to react on a back-to-back when you haven't been playing all season. At Thad's age, I think he's 38, something like that. So I'm interested to see if they go back to it tonight, if he's able to play the same amount of minutes tonight. I don't think it's as necessary to play the same amount of minutes tonight. Zubats has been great for the Clippers, but he's not Anthony Davis, as great as Zubats has been. So what are your expectations? The Raptors have not filed unless they filed while we were recording here. What are your expectations for the Raptors tonight?
Yeah, so let's start with that. First of all, shout out to you, man. That was an epic call, and the detail was just perfect. And I'll say my morning to-do list at the top of it was listening to Thaddeus Young's presser, which I didn't think that was going to happen today. I could talk about the Darko went off. Darko had I would suggest if you like coaches going off, listen to Darko's post-game presser. He was really pissed about the refs because it was like 25-2 or something with the free throws. Part of that was because they were fouling, but there was some pretty rough whistles there. So my read on the situation with that, I think he sticks. He played pretty well. It's not like the Clippers are small. You could execute better switching schemes there too. So I think they start this way again. I don't think the minutes are going to get there for sure. Like we have, I think 20 or 21 minutes. So I think the minutes could kind of drop out because it's a lot easier to play smaller here. They are big dogs, so they're going to probably want to have to go to shooting earlier there. So there's that. And then the other note was Boucher, which you nailed. And I mentioned he's not a post defender. He has on the year 3 post-up defensive possessions, meaning someone shot a post-up shot off him 3 times all year. He is your classic pick and roll low man. That's what he does. He's back, near the basket, hanging the dunker on defense. The rotation helps to the ball handler, switch to, and then it kind of comes over to the roll man for the low man position. So that's what he does. That's it. And they didn't really need that. They aren't going to need that in this spot either. So I think Chris Boucher might really, really crater here. So there's that. Manuel quickly foul trouble. That's been consistent, like a little too often for a guy who doesn't foul a lot. Yeah. So I think his minutes could rebound. That's kind of fluky to me. RJ's playing great, man. 2 good games for RJ in a row. Playing off ball, second side action stuff. And then Scotty Barnes, big defensive role here, probably guarding Kawhi. So we'll see what happens with him. Siakam played pretty well. That's kind of where we're at. So this rotation could get tight is kind of what I'm getting at. I think we could see 7-mans, assuming that, and I could see Jonte Porter also getting cut down. Should also mention Chris Boucher was playing straight backup to Pascal Siakam. They weren't overlapping, and we had Boucher under. Exactly. He's a 4.
He's not a 5.
So we're not going to hit the hour, unfortunately. But we tried.
It's too bad. We did our best, but I would say on the Toronto side of things, the one thing that complicates all these things is that they're not a very deep team, and it's the second night of back-to-back. And so there's not a lot of options to cut down Boucher even further. Mm-hmm. The options are condense the rotation even further. And that's harder to do on the second night of a back-to-back, just generally. So I'm interested. Same thing with cutting down Thad. I think they should cut down Thad. I think they would want to cut down Thad, but then I look at the rest of the roster. I'm like, where are those minutes going? And I don't have a great handle on it because they're not a very deep team at all. Jonte Porter does not look NBA ready at this point in time. So while I think that these guys all could get cut down in terms of the fringier players, I don't have a good option unless they bring in Jalen McDaniels into the lineup or they get Otto Porter Jr. back or something like that. That would really make it clear that you could do that. So the answer would be, if it cuts down, it's tightening on the other guys. and tightening on the second night of back-to-back also a risk. So it's a challenging situation to project, even though there's not that many bodies. The other thing I note on Barnes, you mentioned the primary defensive roles. I saw people in chat talking about his rebounding being down since the acquisition of RJ Barrett. One thing that I've noted before that happens when you are the primary defender on high usage players, it is harder to go rebound because you are contesting shots. And so I think just generally what you might be seeing happening is that the removal of OG Anunoby from the primary wing defensive role is elevating Scotty Barnes into the primary defensive wing role. And that is potentially impacting some of the rebounding stuff for Scotty Barnes in terms of allowing more available opportunities in rebounding for Pascal Siakam and RJ Barrett and those guys as a result of Scotty being asked to be the primary defender and contest on high usage players.
Yep, talked about that as well. 2 games, he guarded Steph. It's pretty hard to grab a rebound when you're guarding Stephen Curry, just from that standpoint. So, 100% agree.
Okay, Clippers side of things, they announced the contract extension for Kawhi Leonard today. Moussa Diabate listed out on the injury report. Nothing else to really touch on the Clips. Any notes you've got for them?
No, just a complete thrashing of the Suns in the fourth quarter. James Harden's playing really well. Paul George playing on a bit of a heater shooting wise. He's been great. Kawhi driving a ton, looks fantastic. Zubac's a really strong game. Minutes held up, rebounding, a lot of good role stats from him. Could be a pretty good matchup with this positional size as well. So, pretty straightforward here. Don't have too much to add.
All right. Well, that'll do it for this edition of Established Run's NBA Injury Report Analysis Show. Some programming notes before we get into the pitches at the end here. There is a 2:00 Eastern game tomorrow. The game in France tomorrow. I believe it's in France. It's somewhere in Europe.
Paris,
in
France. Okay.
Paris, tomorrow. And we will still be doing the show at 2:00 Eastern. Just won't touch on that game from an injury perspective. It'll be Gary Hartman and Mike Gallagher, as you're becoming accustomed to on Thursdays in the booth here. And then Monday, programming note, MLK Day. That is a day in the basketball world that leads to a bunch of games all day long. We will not be doing the show on the holiday. In part because there's just so many games going on. We have to be doing projections work during these windows and whatnot. So Monday we will be off. So wanted to get that programming note out in advance. I will remind people on Friday as well. As always, if you're enjoying the content that we're providing here, please consider subscribing to this YouTube channel. Get notifications by hitting that bell whenever we go live. We have a mission to get to 5,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel by the end of the NBA season, and we'd love your help in that mission. So make sure to subscribe to the channel, tell your friends. And the other way that you can help circulate our content in the algorithm is by smashing that like button. So you smash the like button, it feeds the algorithm, which helps feed our families and allows us to feed you the NBA injury information analysis you need each and every day to set your DFS lineups, your season-long lineups, your spread bets, and your prop bets. So if you want to check us out behind the paywall, establishedrun.com/subscribe-NBA. If you want to help circulate our content, smash that like button. Nom, 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 nom. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care, everybody.